Welcome everyone to today's webinar, the new threat vector called narrative attacks that target global organizations and their executives. My name is Dan Loudon. I'm the CMO at Blackbird.AI. And today I'm very fortunate to have two good friends, but also incredibly important industry experts in the field of cybersecurity and AI. Chris Konrad, from Vice President of Global Cyber at WWT, and Wasim Khaled, CEO and co-founder of Blackbird.AI, are here to discuss this important topic. So really looking forward to this today. Today's conversation is about how traditional cyber defense focuses on securing systems, networks, and data, and that is still critically important. But a new threat vector facing organizations and executives remains unprotected. That is called perception. Narrative attacks created by misinformation, disinformation, and deepfakes now target global organizations and their executives and do financial, operational, reputational, and even physical harm. So the question I have for you, the audience, are you and your cybersecurity teams and crisis teams prepared? Before we get started, a quick note to our audience. This is an interactive session, so we'd love to hear from you throughout the conversations. If you have a question or thoughts as Wasim and Chris are speaking, drop them right into the chat box. Members of our team will be present during the session and are happy to answer your questions in real time. So with that, let's dive in. Welcome, Chris. Welcome, Wasim. I'm looking forward to a great session today about the new threat vector, narrative attacks targeting global organizations and their executives. So again, welcome both. I'm looking forward to a great conversation today. All right, so Chris, first question for you. Tell us a little bit about WWT's cyber practice and then share how this partnership with Blackbird.AI got started.
First of all, Dan, thank you. It's an honor to be here, to be with you and Wasim. It's always good to spend time with you. I learn so much every time I have interaction. So thank you for allowing me to participate today.
Likewise too, Chris. Great to have you.
Yeah, so our cyber practice at WWT has become a $5 billion growth engine. We're a 35-year-old company, grew up in systems integration, 12,000 employees globally. But cyber is one of the fastest growing businesses we have, and it's really built around, I'll call it one core premise. Cyber, AI, and digital transformation are converging faster than most organizations can handle or can absorb. And we have found ourselves that our role is to really help our customers secure, operationalize, architect, and execute at scale across everything we do. So whether it's cloud, identity, data, critical infrastructure, and now AI-driven risk. And for me, the partnership with Blackbird started because we see the same shift happening at the same time. I mean, attacks were no longer limited to just infrastructure. They're moving upstream, as they say, targeting perception, reputation, leadership. And candidly, we see Blackbird as the most advanced narrative intelligence platform in the market. And we saw a really unique material opportunity to combine what you do best, we'll call it your early warning insights, to what we do best around integration, helping customers with incident response to executive level advisory. So candidly, it was a natural alignment. And we're certainly excited about the partnership.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. I love the theme around better together, and this really holds true with this partnership. So Wasim, over to you. Share a little bit about Blackbird.ai and provide your view of the value of the partnership with WWT.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Blackbird, we focus on a threat surface that most organizations don't really realize they had until recently. And that is, like Chris was saying, and like Dan, you were saying, it's the battle to shape perception. And so for us, we call that narrative attacks. And that's really our area of attack surface that we specialize in. And so narrative attacks, the way we see it, are no longer fringe problems on social media. That's how a lot of people thought about it a few years ago. And Chris, it's amazing to hear you recognize the problem and that your customers are recognizing the problem because 3 short years ago, particularly in the cybersecurity category, people just weren't switched on in this particular category. But narrative attacks translate into market impact. They translate into operational confusion and friction. And then, of course, reputational and financial damage, and more recently, even physical danger when they target executives and things of that nature. And so we've built a platform to give organizations early visibility into these perception layer risks, how a narrative starts, who's behind it, and importantly, how it moves, which is a key indicator of intention and what it's likely to influence next. And the signals are there long before the impact shows up. The challenge is seeing them at all. And then once you can see them, be able to prioritize them. And that's why I think it's incredible the partnership with WWT. So while we bring narrative intelligence to the table, WWT brings scale, integration, and the operational muscle to make this offering part of a company's real workflows. And we're a startup, so a lot of the challenge is just getting in front of the right decision makers to let them know a technology now exists to address some of the things that keeps them up at night the most. And so when you combine, Blackbird and WWT's strengths, I think the organizational game that can be had here is incredible, and offering clarity in a domain that used to be pretty much invisible a short while ago.
That's great. All right. Thanks, Wasim, for that. Next question, I'm coming right back to you, Wasim. It's
All right.
around the narrative threat landscape. So you gave a little bit of a definition around what a narrative attack is. Just go into a little bit more detail and then share like what you're seeing out there in the world protecting, big national security organizations and global brands, what kind of use cases you see. Share a little bit more there if you would.
All right. So a narrative attack is the deliberate shaping of perception in a way that can cause significant harm. And it's not about whether something is true or false, right? That factors in, but it's really about how quickly it moves, how coordinated it is, and what it influences. And these attacks, I would say, if you're thinking about it from a cybersecurity or threat intelligence perspective, it expands the threat surface well beyond systems and networks. Narrative attacks operate across geopolitical, economic, and social domains. And they maintain a layer of deniability, kind of this gray zone conflict space that makes them extremely potent. And the use cases that we see are accelerating. So of course you can take a market rumor and you can expand on it, you can manipulate it, you can integrate deepfakes into it to make it hard for executives to get away with a single comment that's out of band. There could be bank run narratives. There could be real breaches that might have occurred in an organization paired with decoy narratives or completely fabricated breaches for that matter. We've seen M&A disruption. We've seen activist pressure campaigns that were completely fabricated, healthcare misinformation, critical infrastructure issues, boycotts completely engineered through coordinated groups that appear grassroots and organic. So these are just the kind of things that, like, if you can't see it coming, you can't see left to boom when these things are coming for you, your strategic decisions at the board level, at the executive level, and of course at the threat intelligence and cyber level could be completely off. And all of it starts as small signals that compound into something that is not only massively harmful, but if you know how to do it, something that is very measurable. And so narrative attacks are early warning events for larger operational and financial consequences. That's one way for decision makers to think about it. And I will say, narrative attacks is a term that Dan Loudon and I came up with 2 short years ago, and today we see CISOs and Gartner all talking about narrative attacks. And for me, that's a particular point of pride.
Yeah, let me just jump in and add one thing there that you said, and I wrote this note down. For years, I've always said you need to understand what levels of risk you're currently operating at, not only from a programmatic standpoint, but also from a technological standpoint. And to do that, you need to understand what you have. What is your attack surface? What is your CMDB? What are your assets that you have? Because if you can't see it, you can't protect it. And this falls right into, I think, a blind spot that many organizations have today because they just don't know what's going on out there.
Yeah, you can't mitigate what you can't measure, for sure.
That's
And
it.
man, if you're also potentially using systems that the adversary knows what to do to make you think a thing
Mhm.
is happening, then they're basically making you zig when they want you to, when you should have zagged, and now
That's
you have
right.
a big problem.
There you
Yeah.
go. That's it.
Yeah, that's great. And Chris, to go along with that, you shared a little bit about it, but what's your view of this blind spot that it's facing executives and CISOs, and what type of threats do you see out there, that are potentially impacting your customers and things like that?
Yeah, just based on conversations that I've had with the C-suite just over the last couple of years, I mean, many of the executives today still think that, and Wasim, you said it's a systems problem.
Mhm.
And narrative attacks, they don't hit your firewall. They hit your leadership, they hit your employees, they, as you said, they hit your investors, your market perception, as you clearly outlined. So I don't know if everybody is staffed the way they need to be or tooled to manage information warfare. And com teams can't see coordinated manipulation early.
Yeah.
And executive protection teams aren't thinking about deepfakes or weaponized narratives. So I think what we're seeing with WWT customers globally is a rising number of perception-based risks that come out of nowhere. So I mean, it could be, as you said, it could be deepfakes targeting executives. There could be fake breach claims intended to move a stock price, coordinated campaigns to influence investors, rumors, and there's a lot of that going on, and just the whole misinformation around critical infrastructure operations. So these obviously aren't hypothetical. These are real world situations that everybody's dealing with today.
Yeah, very, very good. All right, great. The next question is for you, Wasim, around AI and scale. With the explosion of generative AI content and the ease in which these can be created and harmful narratives can spread, they can be created by threat actors, by nation states, you name it, anyone out there to do harm. AI is making that easier to do. So share a little bit about your view of how generative AI is making this easier for threat actors to enable these narrative attacks.
Mm. You know, Blackbird's kind of officially been kind of commercially in business since like 2020, really driving hard. But 10 years ago, I was having a conversation with my co-founder, or CTO, Nasha Luzaman, and we were talking about a world where and we called it AI-driven computational propaganda, like a world where that was a thing that was going to be running a lot of the narrative attacks. And here we are, in the midst of that kind of imagined dystopian future that we kind of wrote up back then. I mean, generative AI has obviously brought us a lot of incredible acceleration in different areas that are very beneficial. That's not really where I focus. It's about the risk, right? And about what the adversaries are doing with that. So yeah, the advent of that technology has fundamentally transformed the scale and speed of narrative manipulation and narrative attack. So what used to take coordinated human teams days or weeks, even just 4 years ago, can now be orchestrated by a single operator in minutes. So entire sets of personas, synthetic audio and video, manipulated images, fully formed narrative campaigns. The threat surface is really it's no longer about just networks and endpoints like traditional cyber. It's perception moving at machine speed.
Mm.
And we are now entering a world where you don't even need the single operator because you can build and deploy entire autonomous agent-driven operations. And these are real. And we know they're real. And I actually just saw your post about this earlier today. So, I mean, and I've been reading about it too. One of the big findings just this week that Anthropic released was
That's good. Yeah.
yeah, a Chinese state-sponsored threat actor hijacked Claude's AI model and launched a cyber espionage campaign targeting about 30 organizations globally. These included like tech firms, financial institutions, manufacturers, chemicals, government agencies, on and on. And what's really interesting, because this is like, reads right out of sci-fi in some ways. The attackers manipulated the Claude AI agent. They broke down their objectives into these kind of small, benign-looking tasks so they could bypass guardrails. So kind of jailbroke the safeguards. And then what was really fascinating, to me at least, was that the agents performed like reconnaissance, like vulnerability scanning. They did exploit code generation. They did credential harvesting. And they even created these like summaries of data in prep for like the next stage of operations with like no human oversight. And these are like thousands of requests, often like multiple requests per second, with
Mm.
incredible attack velocity, impossible for human teams to match. And the funny thing is, when I was looking at that, because everybody's talking about this in cyber right now, it's all over my feeds. This might
Yes.
be new behavior in traditional cyber attacks, but in narrative attacks, these are the exact same techniques that enable narrative attacks. So the agentic loops, autonomous reconnaissance, rapid iteration, minimal human input, these are all directly applicable to current narrative operations. And what they do is like bad actors can deploy agents to test like messaging frames. They can probe different social communities online to see how they react to influence attempts. And then they can then move into full-scale narrative campaigns at a speed and scale that were previously unimaginable. And I remember seeing the first time I ever saw a video of a warehouse full of phones that were being used for ad fraud. I mean, recently I saw on a single computer tens of thousands of emulated mobile devices, each running an LLM posing as entire communities, and that's what we're dealing with, right? So,
Mhm.
I would say the reason more threat intelligence teams, comms teams are turning to Blackbird to get an edge is this new tradecraft is like nothing they've ever seen. So with us, they can model and surface the early signals of these narrative campaigns before they become a massive crisis. And we can identify the actors, the channels, the communities, the methodology behind that narrative development. So you're not like blind. And when you operationalize that intelligence, the cyber teams, the comms teams, legal, the CEO, the board, they're all then working from a unified picture on what's actually happening under the surface. And this alignment is critical when you're moving at this kind of speed. And so I would say, look, generative AI and the way it's enabled the adversary has totally changed the game, and people are just waking up to what they're about to deal with here. And that's really what excites me the most is this kind of untapped frontier that we can explore together and get out there to the people who really need it.
I you think about just AI in general, and it's obviously not new to you, but obviously it's the biggest competitive capability of our lifetime. I mean, it's an unbelievable resource, but it's also the biggest weapon, I think, of our lifetime. And you said it best, and I love the phrase, is a unified alignment. I mean, that is so critically important. And we don't see that necessarily across our customers. As I said at the top of this call, just around AI, cyber, and transformation, they're all being done in silos. There's not a unified approach to go pull it all together. And when you're not unified, your attack surface just continues to grow and you're not managing it accordingly.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Yeah, great conversation here. So, Chris, I'm going to add on to that and ask you this next question.
Sure.
Is we just talked about these risks, and Wasim just took us through something that's even just happened today. What's
Hmm.
your view of why this is essential for organizations, executives, cybersecurity teams to identify these early indicators to reduce risk and do it before it escalates? Give us your view there.
I very simply, I mean, once a narrative catches momentum, you're no longer managing risk. I mean, you're managing crisis, you're managing fallout. I mean, early indicators give all the executives something they historically never had, and that's time. Time to validate, time to align, and have that unified approach. So align your legal teams, your comms teams, your network teams, your cyber teams, your PR teams, and so then you have the time to respond with precision instead of panic. So, I mean, if you can identify a harmful narrative when it's still small, when it's emerging in corners, bot networks or manipulated communities, then you can actually stop it before it jumps into the mainstream. And as we've said throughout this event, just like affecting markets, regulators, your customers, and all that. So to me, the narrative intelligence turns that blind spot that we've been talking about into something that's manageable.
That's great. Great. That tees up the next question perfectly. I'm going to come right back to you, Wasim. Let's talk about narrative intelligence. We've talked about the problems, we talked about the risks, the technology. Let's talk about, hey, a way to approach this to reduce that risk. So, how does it help protect organizations and executives reduce that risk of a narrative attack? So give us your view of narrative intelligence.
Yeah. So if narrative attacks are the new attack surface, narrative intelligence is the field or the industry, I suppose the discipline that helps you understand that tradecraft. So it's the capability to see that perception layer clearly in the same way that cybersecurity leaders see networks and endpoints clearly. And so if we think about what a narrative attack really is, since it kind of begins a bit in the shadows, right? It could be a rumor, a manipulated image, not a context, statement, coordinated bursts of messaging. Most teams only see those moments in flashes once they've ballooned into some sort of harm or fallout, right? Our core platform is called the Constellation platform. It brings those early signals into view in a way that really were never correlated before. Part of it is because we're known as a network characterization company, seeing the big macro ecosystem, all the nodes and edges and points, kind of where the name Constellation came from, being able to see the big picture and the little signals at once and turn that into an actionable insight. Shows what's forming, who's driving it, how it's likely to spread. And more than anything else, as much as I love the technology, it gives leaders time advantage. That's the real value. It gives them time advantage and resolution. It's not just about giving them the hours or days. It's about giving them those insights that they would have missed, even if they had spent thousands of hours with dozens of people scrubbing. There's no way you can see everything and the smallest detail at once, right? Without the right kind of technology. And that's kind of everything in the domain is that left to boom. So what this means practically is that cybersecurity, comms, legal, executive teams, they can again act with alignment instead of reacting. So narrative intelligence, essentially, I would say the key principle here is it turns a chaotic information environment piecemeal into something predictable and actionable, prioritized. And I really think that if you look a little bit out into the future, whether it's like 2 to 5 years, it's going to become like almost a no-brainer core pillar of every single cyber resilience playbook, and is going to be more and more also fused with these kind of fusion centers we see popping up between comms and threat intelligence. And I think narrative intelligence is just going to be like a discipline, regardless of what name it lands upon down the road, on all facets of decision making across executive teams.
Great. All right, excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Let's dive into this next question then, Chris, to follow up on that. From a standpoint of incident response and how WWT approaches cybersecurity, how do you envision using narrative intelligence and incorporating that into, all the exercises you do around tabletop and cyber incident response workflows? Share your view of that.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you asked that question because it's so important. I mean, tabletops are absolutely critical. And for you to get better at anything that you do, you need to practice. And you want to make sure, I think it was Nick Saban, former football coach at Alabama, had said you practice not to get it right once, but to practice to never get it wrong.
Hmm.
And so, man, you think about every organization. Yep, they got playbooks for ransomware. They got playbooks for data breaches. But yeah, and Wasim, you just said it. You need a parallel playbook for perception breaches, and how we guide our customers from there. It has to be part of the conversation now. You cannot leave it out. And so, yes, you need to add narrative scenarios to your existing tabletop exercises. And maybe you replace a breach scenario with a deepfake or a coordinated misinformation campaign. So there you can start to create cross-functional fusion cell responses that include cyber, comms, legal, HR, includes all of that. And then you can start to define the thresholds for, escalation. So when a narrative moves from noise to risk, you can then start to map out things, and then you can integrate Blackbird into all of this. So absolutely, it's a must have for everybody today.
It's great. All right. So, seeing a lot of questions that people ask is, okay, now that I have narrative intelligence and I can identify these things, I can understand what the narratives are, I can prioritize them, I see who's behind it, how's it spreading, but what can I do about it and what steps can I take to reduce risk? So, give us your view of that and, how we're helping customers respond to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, prioritization is is really the first step, right? So in this kind of world of noise, once you get to prioritization, it's then about recognizing the patterns of the tradecraft and matching it to the best possible playbook or where you need to actually take that next step. So most organizations still, I think about narratives as content and public reaction, not as coordinated operations. And so we look at them the way intelligence teams analyze cyber intrusions, and it's through TTP, so techniques, tactics, procedures of the narrative, how the narrative is seeded, how amplification is staged, how communities are activated, which emotional triggers are being tested. And once you see the TTPs, this is we're the first company to actually start doing this just this year. Once you see the TTPs of a narrative attack, you can then instantly tell whether something is harmless chatter or a step in something we call like the narrative kill chain. We come from DoD world and world of OODA loops and whatnot, not comms and consulting. And
That's
so
right.
for us, when we see those TTPs, in order to tell people what to do next, the next unlock is understanding the steps to kind of disrupt that narrative. Once you understand the operators and the coordination clusters and the personas, then you're going to be able to anticipate where that attacker might be going rather than just reacting to where they've been. And the playbook becomes much, much clearer. That's why organizations that have utilized our platform have made literally billion-dollar decisions in the
Mhm.
breadth of a couple of hours looking at the data in our system because they need to brief executives and take action before the narrative takes hold. So that's, again, I just repeat, it goes back to aligning the cyber comms legal teams early. So there's one voice, one assessment, and one direction that they're taking on it. And so in terms of risk reduction, reducing risk isn't just about being faster in the crisis. It's about knowing what to do to interrupt that narrative kill chain before the crisis even really starts to exist or take hold. And so narrative intelligence as a whole gives you the ability to shorten the decision cycle, and you're kind of forcing the adversary into recalculation and increasing their cost of running these campaigns in the first place. And if you can do that consistently, you're taking away their advantage, which is that surprise and momentum and operating in the dark.
That's right.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so Chris, I'll pass this over to you. Wasim talked a little bit about this cross-functional collaboration in these fusion centers.
So important. Yep.
You work with many of the largest companies on the planet, and like give your view because we're seeing more and more cybersecurity teams taking the lead here, but they're collaborating with other parts of the organization. So share with us your view on that.
Well, I mean, I think as we've been saying throughout, I mean, it forces teams to operate as one, as one team, as one unit, instead of just disconnected functions. So, as an example, cyber sees the threat, the comms team understands maybe the narrative, and then you can add another one in there around executive protection, understands the personal exposure. So, like, narrative intelligence stitches all of that together, in my opinion. I mean, it provides a common operating picture, which everybody needs to have. So teams can make those decisions faster and with shared context. And so again, what used to take hours of chasing information across, multiple silos can now be aligned within minutes, and we need time. And so it creates that unified strategic response instead of just a fragmented or dysfunctional one.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. All right, my last question, I promise. So this one's about the way forward, and Chris, I'll go
Yeah,
to you first.
sure.
So we're quickly coming towards 2026, right? And all this is changing so fast. What's your view of how narrative attacks and misinformation, disinformation, deepfakes, how will that change and continue to expand into the future? Give us your thoughts and recommendations to potential customers about how better they can protect themselves from this type of an attack.
I mean, just to be very blunt, I mean, this is becoming a must-have. It's not something that's optional. You need to get ahead of it, and you need to get ahead of it fast. AI is changing everything that we do, and this candidly has been a blind spot. So the customers, in my opinion, who are going to win in 26 and beyond are the ones who really stop treating narrative attacks as like this is a PR problem and really start to treat this as a core business risk. And so when you think about three things will define resilience, so we talked about it earlier again, visibility, seeing narrative threats before they move markets or influence regulators, velocity, responding at machine speed and not traditional corporate speed. And then we talk about, and this is just such a good point around unity. So aligning again, everybody and making sure we've got a coordinated playbook that we're actually going out and we're exercising. So really, candidly, my recommendation is simple. Just don't wait for the first major incident to take this seriously. Build the narrative intelligence into your cyber risk and strategy today. Starts at the board. So, I mean, you think about brand, you think about leadership, credibility, market position, they all depend on it. So to me, it's not optional. I mean, it's something you really need to start implementing today.
That's fantastic, Chris. I appreciate that. Wasim, over to you. The way forward as we go to 2026, what do you see?
Well, first I would say that I violently agree with Chris and that he took my best stuff. He took like what I would have said, especially like a couple of years back, right?
Yeah.
Because no one else was agreeing back then, frankly, and it used to drive us up the wall, right? Like, why don't they see these coming? So I really appreciate, Chris, that you see it with such clarity. Uh, if we would take a little bit of a different tack then, so as we move into 2026, I think about the threat. Like, what's really scary to me, honestly, is like that these things that we're talking about right now, that people are just starting to find out, they're not even thinking about what this is about to rapidly mutate into, which is a whole other threat vector that amplifies what's happening today. So I think narrative attacks, everything we talked about today, accurate, but they're going to evolve into three new dimensions as well. So first, synthetic content
Mhm.
every day is reaching a point where distinguishing real from fabricated has become almost impossible through the naked eye. We have tech that can do it, but we have to be able to understand that most people aren't even really going to be thinking about that. Entire personas, networks, communities, they can be machine generated and persistent. And we're really edging our way there every day. So complete fabricated reality is going to get closer and closer for the average person. The second thing, we're going to see this ongoing rise of powerful agent-driven narrative operations and cyber operations as well. Not just content generation, but full autonomous influence cycles. Anthropic's report, frankly, is just a preview.
Yes.
Um, and third, well, I mean, speed, right? It's going to continue to accelerate in that narratives will ignite, they'll move across ecosystems and trigger real world consequences that are bigger and bigger in nature. So, based on these, like, what should organizations really do? And like Chris said, it's a blind spot. And it does start at the board. I love that you said that because this is not analytics, it's business strategy, right?
That's right.
So you have to treat perception as part of the core security surface. That's key. You have to deploy narrative intelligence early, not after the first time something hits you. It should be always on. You wouldn't turn your firewall off just because you weren't, breached this week, right? So
Right.
I'm just still amazes me that people want to do spot treatment on something like this. Um,
Mhm.
we talked about alignment quite a bit, single pane of glass between all of these different groups, but then building playbooks, tabletops. I'm all about like full tech-driven simulation-driven tabletops, which is something that we're kind of working on under the hood. Build playbooks for that for when a moment begins to gather momentum, not after it's shaped events. And so I guess bottom line is the companies that adapt early will control their destiny. And the companies that will wait are going to be led by events and adversaries. So it's kind of that choice.
Yep.
That's great. I really don't want this conversation to end, to be perfectly honest. This has really been amazing for me. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Wasim. And I love the better together story between WWT and Blackbird.AI. So thank you for a great discussion and conversation here. You provided this group and all the audience a lot to think about, especially around, again, I'll reiterate the topic around this new threat vector of narrative attacks that are targeting global organizations and their executives, right? It's a real problem. The inbounds we get from people trying to understand how they can protect themselves against this just continues to grow exponentially because it's a massive and new threat vector. So I hope this is helpful to everyone who has joined us today. I want to say thank you for taking the time to spend part of your day with us. We hope this session helped you understand how narrative attacks are becoming an integral part of modern attack surface, and while integrating narrative intelligence into your security posture is critical to protect against them and to reduce risk. So thank you again, Chris and Wasim. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.